Hello, and welcome to Little Live Story, the podcast where we take an anime and turn it into a movie.
And a movie turned into an anime.
I'm Eric.
I'm Jared.
And what does Jared have for Eric today?
All right, we're getting right into it. Today, I got a special treat for you.
Drum roll.
Goblin Slayer.
Oh, okay. Being perfectly frank, I think this is the least bad thing you've shown me.
You can also say best. That is what best means. Best of the worst is still the best.
You got a point.
Anyway, Goblin Slayer, as you might imagine, is about a guy that kills goblins. But it's much more complex than that, believe it or not.
Complex is not the word I'd use, but...
In a small fantasy-like world, goblins are an increasing problem, as well as other monsters and other things. But there's one guy that doesn't go on adventures, doesn't go hunt dragons, doesn't bother ranking up. All he does is slay dragons. He is known as... Wait.
All he does is what, Jared?
Hold on. Scratch that.
No. Just continue.
No.
All he does is slay...
Goblins. Obviously.
Okay.
Anyway, that was my mistake. I'm sorry. I'm very flustered now. That threw me way off.
No shit.
He meets a young woman who has recently become an adventurer, a priestess, and it ends up having her tag along with him on his never-ending quest to slay all the goblins.
And there's a lot of fucking goblins.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
As he mercilessly hunts them down, he eventually meets another group of adventurers that want him to help him slay, guess what, more goblins. And he goes on several adventures to killing all these goblins. It's basically all he does is kill goblins. Once in a while he kills something else, but it's basically always ends up back at goblins.
Yeah, it's a bit one note in that way. On purpose. I'll say on purpose. Yeah, being nice. Okay, before I begin, there's something I have to say about my adaptation of Goblin Slayer.
Okay.
I'm not even sure why, but I just got this vibe about it when we were watching it. My adaptation is specifically a Netflix movie.
Why?
I'm not sure. Maybe it has something to do with how gritty and down to earth and grimy and honestly just messed up Goblin Slayer is, but it just fits that kind of unrated streaming service aesthetic, and Netflix has done live action adaptations of animes before.
So you're making it a Netflix adaptation so that doesn't need to apply to any like TV rules and movie rules?
Not even specifically. It's not like there's no rules. It's just the style just works for me, so I'm just going with it. So just keep that in mind.
All right, go ahead.
So we open on some pristine shots of farmland. Just normal, average, everyday, cute, adorable fantasy farm.
Okay.
And after the establishing shots are gotten out of the way, we just follow a young, kind of maybe 20-year-old farmhand going around the place. He waters crops, scares away crows from corn stalks. He bales hay. He does all the normal chores you'd expect a farmhand to do until he gets to the chicken coop. The chicken coop, bloody as hell. There's feathers everywhere. There's gore. It's messed up. And there's little tiny footprints all over the place. He seems to know what this means, and it seems to be a bad thing. He turns away and calls out to the house nearby, Greg, some name, runs over when there's no answer, looks in the window, and there's those same little footprints climbing up the side of the house, through the window, into the bedroom. The bed is torn up, there's signs of a struggle, and whoever he was looking for in that house is gone. Then we cut and we see what amounts to a small militia of farmers and farmhands and locals, all in a big circle, just worked into a frenzy. They have axes and torches and pitchforks, and they're all discussing what's going on. The main theme of what they're talking about is, say it with me, goblins.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Which brings me to a question. I don't know whether the Goblin Slayer, in universe, has appeared yet. If he has, though, whether one way or the other, has he shown his face? Because in Goblin Slayer, the Goblin Slayer never actually shows his face. There's times where he takes off his helmet, for sure. But through, stylistic things, either his eyes aren't showing or whatever, we only ever see part of his face at any given moment. So if he has appeared, do we see his face?
Oh, okay, sorry. You jumped ahead so much with this question, you threw me off. But you're essentially asking if any of these people are the Goblin Slayer out of their masks.
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Anyway, they all seem to be hating goblins. They're like, oh, those little sons of bitches killed my chickens this morning and kidnapped my son. Oh yeah, last week they killed my pig. Last week they burned down my farm and almost did something with my daughter. Terrible. So they're all just working themselves into a frenzy, and 5 or 6 of these guys resolve to just follow the tracks and hunt down the goblins.
All right.
We follow them into a cave. And then, very similar to the anime, within the next 2 minutes or so, even faster than in the anime even, these people are dead.
Yeah, so it sounds about right.
They underestimate their attempted prey and are just mostly in shadow. We don't get a great look at the goblins yet, but their ankles are slashed. They fall into traps. They're beset upon from all sides by these little gremlin-esque, freaky green guys with knives and sticks and such. And they're all just horribly, horribly slaughtered. And by the end of the scene, when the last man alive is just being killed by a gaggle of goblins, we see a torch ignite in the far background of the cave. All the goblins kind of wince at the new light source and turn to see a man in really dramatic, angular, cool-ass plate armor walking towards them, torch in hand.
I do gotta ask, does he have the cool eye flare effect on him?
No.
Okay. I mean,
As we discussed, yeah, it's too much of a Japanese thing, and it just doesn't make sense in universe.
I completely understand. It's just a really cool feature, and I had to ask.
He's still got cool style, but no, he does not have that one anime power eye thing.
Gotcha.
But so, yes, this naturally is the Goblin Slayer. He walks just straight on, looking like a Terminator towards his prey. Then we cut, title card, Goblin Slayer.
All right.
We cut away and we are nowhere near this cave. Completely different setting. We're in what amounts to kind of an imperial looking city, like a shining example of a medieval town. There's tall marble buildings and horse-drawn carriages and a marketplace and all this stuff. Once we're done with those establishing shots, we cut inside and we're in what amounts to a waiting room with 3 characters who will become our party. Much like the anime, there's a young woman who's a priestess who can do miracles, magic. There's a ranger who is essentially, if you combine Aragorn and Legolas from Lord of the Rings and turn them into an elf chick.
Okay.
And a lizard man who's like a 6'7" dragonic crocodile man.
All right. I have a question.
Yes.
In the anime, all the characters don't actually have names. Goblin Slayer included. I'm sure he has a name in universe, but it's never stated.
Yes, we're keeping that.
Okay. So priestess is called priestess, ranger's called ranger, and the dragon guy is
Lizard
called
man
dragon
is
guy.
called like druid or something cool.
Okay.
But yeah, so their monikers are
Their classes.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
So they wait around in the waiting room for just a few quick seconds before the ranger speaks up. She's clearly edgy. Her foot's tapping and she's impatient. We get a little bit of who they are. We get their classes, like I said. We get a bit of who these weird adventure-looking folks are. But pretty quickly, door opens and they are all let in to speak to who they're waiting to see. And it's the same person. They're all there for the same reason. They didn't know that at first. They are quickly given a quest by some bureaucratic medieval higher up person who says that there is a very valiant and dangerous warrior roaming the western countryside who has proven himself time and time again to be a really, really useful fighter. And they are on the eve of a war with some new dark lord kind of thing who is summoning all sorts of evil creatures and causing chaos, and they need every brave adventurer and epic fighter they can. So these people are given money and gold and equipment to go out and find this person. This obviously is Goblin Slayer, but he calls them a different name. They agree to the money and the quest, run out into the marketplace, buy some supplies, and during this bit, we get a little bit more of who they are and a little bit more of that dynamic, but pretty quickly, we leave, and we see them travel and camp until they reach the farm from the opening scene. They get the lowdown on what happened from one of the farmers, that half of the men in this small farming village were slaughtered by goblins, and then a man arrived to slaughter said goblins, and they, through essentially medieval detective work, get the information they need, follow to the place where the Goblin Slayer took the quest from, and ask them information. They're backtracking to find Goblin Slayer. And so Goblin Slayer, apparently, after killing those opening goblins, got another goblin quest and ran off. How many times can I say goblins in this episode?
It's Goblin Slayer about killing goblins. You're going to say it a lot.
Yeah, it's not really my fault. So they follow the Goblin Slayer's tracks, and literally and figuratively they got the same quest that he did, which was to clear out an old military fort that's abandoned and now full of goblins. They arrive there, call it the next day, whenever, it doesn't really matter, and they make a quick plan to go inside and kill the goblins themselves to hopefully head off the Goblin Slayer and be there waiting for him. Their plan operates under a few incorrect assumptions. They rush in a little too headstrong, and it doesn't go super, super well.
Makes perfect sense.
Goblins are far more dangerous than even these clearly brave adventurers are aware of. One of them gets their ankle slashed, one of them gets a knife in the kneecap or something, and they all just kind of get roughed up. until Goblin Slayer arrives.
Does he get an epic badass guitar riff when he enters?
I don't think so. I did like that, but it's not the vibe I'm
little
going
too
for.
heavy-handed.
Yeah,
So-
I'm trying to keep it a little more in line with the fantasy D&D style.
So then is it more like the opening where it's like a solemn, quiet epic?
It's more like Howard Shore, Lord of the Ringsy music.
Ah,
Like
gotcha.
sweeping kind of epic. But yeah.
Okay, I understand.
But so he arrives and just fucks up all the goblins, saves them incidentally, really. He's more killing the goblins than he is saving our party.
Yeah.
And by the time it's done, he slashes the head off the last little green guy, looks past them, walks away, ignores them entirely. They chase him down, asking if he's the man they're after. He says, "Who are you after?" They say, "Goblin Slayer." He says, "Yeah, I guess that's me," or whatever name they knew him from. And they give him the brief spiel of what they need him for, and he gives them his thing from the anime, which amounts to asking, "Does your quest involve goblins?"
Yeah.
They say, "Not specifically." He says, "Then I don't care." Walks away.
Hell yeah. Best thing about him is the fact he doesn't give a damn about the world ending. He just cares about goblins.
Yes, so that is entirely retained. He just essentially asks, "Are we killing goblins on this quest?" They're like, "I don't know. I don't think so." He's like, "Then I have work to do." Leaves.
Yeah.
So he's going back to get paid for this quest of dead goblins, and they just follow him trying to convince him. So he camps for the night. They camp with him. We get little bits of character development, more of these guys than him, because he's solemn and, as you said, always in the helmet, just looking like fucking medieval Iron Man, just staring at the fire. And they're prodding him for information and trying to get him to budge a bit about coming with them. He barely says a word, doesn't work. And they follow him all the way back to the place where he gets paid. And he, again, immediately takes the gold, asks, "Is there another goblin quest?" They say yes. Hand him the quest forms, the information, the details, the map, whatever. He takes it and leaves. The party is already getting a little fed up with this, but say, fuck it. This is our job. This is our quest. We can't just say no. We already took the money for this, so let's go. They follow him.
Roped into his quest.
It's more of a crusade.
Yeah, well, for him, yes.
At some point on their travels to the next goblin purge, they see a very upsetting sight. There's call it a troll or a giant or some big scary fantasy monster attacking a cart full of innocent travelers on the road. They're adventurers, so they spring into action and attack. Goblin Slayer doesn't. Goblin Slayer walks the fuck by as if nothing were going on, and the party eventually, through
They're separate skills.
finishes the monster. It's difficult, but they do it. They use magic and bows, and they kill the creature. The people they rescued say, "Thank you so much. You're valiant. Take our gold, please. It's all we have, but thank you so much." They're like, no, we're doing this for, reasons. And then sprint to catch up with Goblin Slayer, who, again, doesn't seem to give a shit. And they yell at him. They say, "What kind of adventure, what kind of hero are you?" He's just the kind that kills goblins. Walks away. And so they're getting a little pissed off about this affair. And we get a little more travel, a little more light character development, a little more them being annoyed and wary now of Goblin Slayer because he's that dedicated to his goal.
Yeah, he's just honestly flat out crazy. Like, he's the quiet kind of crazy.
Yeah, just look out for the quiet types. And one of them, let's say the ranger character, broaches the subject to the others of getting the fuck out of here. Just saying, "We can't even do this. He's a lost cause. We'll return the gold, hope for a better person to go look for. They'll understand. We can't put all our eggs in this guy's basket." The other two aren't quite sure. And Goblin Slayer, because you can never tell what he's looking at, what he's listening to, is nearby, hears this conversation, turns and says, "Maybe you should leave. Or shouldn't. I don't care." Just being full-on anime protagonist, I suppose.
Hell yeah.
Then we cut to that night, and they have a nice little scene. The Goblin Slayer opens up a tiny, tiny bit about why he hates goblins. We get a little bit of that theoretical lore that they allude to in the anime about where goblins may or may not have come from.
Gotcha.
They all have their own cultural story about where goblins may or may not have come from, and Goblin Slayer is the only one who doesn't say anything. But at the end of this night, everyone's going to sleep. As we assume Goblin Slayer, we don't know because he's a statue. And the ranger resolves to just do exactly as she said and leave. She packs up her bag very quietly because she's an elf and slinks off down the road back the way they came. And just before she rounds a bend in the road, she turns back to look at them, maybe reconsidering. And then whack, she gets smacked on the back of the head with a big ass log, falls into the brush, surrounded by goblins and something slightly larger than a goblin, but goblinoid. And before she can scream for help, they slash her throat, drag her away.
Oh, fuck. Oh, no. Ranger.
Yeah, no, not Legagorn. So the next morning, one of the other two travelers who aren't Goblin Slayer, the priestess or the lizard man, go off for their morning pee or to look for firewood or something and notice the signs of the struggle. They see blood in the road, follow the tracks into the woods, call the others over, and they all investigate the scene. They're really worried naturally, and Goblin Slayer immediately jumps to the conclusion that, oh, well, she's dead. Let's find who did this. They're immediately offended by the prospect. They're like, no, she's not dead. We don't know that for sure. We have to save her. He's like, well, there's blood here, and they didn't carry her. They dragged her. That means she's probably dead. You know, his goblin knowledge leads him to believe that she is indeed dead. And we as the audience know he's correct.
Yeah.
So they, rashly assuming they're on a rescue mission, run off without him to follow the tracks. And they run straight into a trap. They follow the tracks right into like a boggy creek that has a small network of almost gopher-like holes everywhere that the goblins pop in and out of, and it gets bloody really fast. The lizard man gets taken down and just mobbed on by tons and tons of goblins. The priestess uses her magic to try and heal him, but she's too busy saving him that she doesn't save herself. She gets tackled and almost molested, and it's gross and creepy and horrible, and all hope is lost. Then again, Goblin Slayer mellowly walks in and starts hacking shit up. And partway through this scene, he obviously frees them from the hell they're in, and they start fighting too.
Yeah.
And we see that the big creature was, as he calls it, a hobgoblin, a subset of goblin, some kind of half-breed or something. And he, again, as in the anime, says that they're being led by a shaman, a very dangerous magic-using type of goblin kind of thing. And they have a big fight. This is like 9 minutes of action and tension that leads to more action, that leads to more tension, that leads to more action. By the end, they have a boss fight with a hobgoblin. Goblin Slayer slits the throat of the shaman and does some weird magic prayer out of something he pulls out of his backpack that dispels the goblin shaman's evil magics. And they all take a much needed breath, having just killed like 60 goddamn ambushing goblins.
Fuck yeah, go Goblin Slayer.
So then we just get a few seconds to breathe in this aftermath scene where the two of them, the party, look at each other, nod consideringly, turn back to Goblin Slayer and say, okay, now will you come with us? He looks around the scene, kind of surveys what happened. Maybe he's considering their words. Then he comes to a conclusion that he articulates to them in the audience that this wasn't the group of goblins they set out to kill. These goblins were after them specifically. These goblins came from behind them, and this was more of a goblin hit squad. He was after a different group of goblins that are often, I don't know, an abandoned mine shaft somewhere. So his job's not done. So he says, no, my job's not done. These goblins are just incidental. You want to come? Bye. Walks off as he does. As they're watching him walk away, we cut. We cut to a college dorm room.
Wait, what?
We see some, again, Lord of the Rings posters, Harry Potter posters on the wall.
No.
And then we zoom out and we see a group of college kids centered around a D&D board. There's a figurine that is obviously Goblin Slayer being walked away from two figurines that are obviously the Lizard Man and the Priestess, and another person is off in the corner feverishly scribbling a new character sheet.
Oh.
The anime has
We'll talk about this in a minute. Finish painting your picture.
Fair enough. The DM is clearly, Dungeon Master for the uninitiated few, is clearly controlling Goblin Slayer. And so the players now who are playing the party seem a little bit out of character, fed up with this. They're just tired and they look at the DM and they're like, so are we going to get anywhere with this? This seems repetitive. Like, can we do something else? Like, fuck this guy, right? Like, I think we might be tired. It's late. I have to go study. I think we're going to be done. And then the DM, who must love Goblin Slayer, must love this campaign or what have you, says like, no, you're almost getting through to him, guys. You just haven't said the right things. They're like, what do you mean the right things? You said everything. The DM, clearly not wanting to stop playing, thinks to himself for a moment and then says, guys, you've had everything you need from the start. The guy who hired you said that the Dark Lord is using all manner of evil magical creatures, right? And they're like, yeah, and they look at each other. Immediately we dip back into the fiction. The Lizard Man and the Priestess look at each other, having that same realization that their players have, and then chase after Goblin Slayer, like, no, wait, we have a proposition. Running away. We tilt up past the tree line into the sky. There's clouds. It's nice. Cut to credits.
Okay, so let's just start here. I'm going to say, for those that don't know, in the opening with the theme song and the actual imagery, as well as in the anime itself, there's a lot of references to D&D.
Dice and experience and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I just thought that the anime did it at kind of a half measure. It kind of dances around it. It wants to use D&D terms without actually making it make any sense within the universe. It doesn't fully explain anything, and it doesn't explain why the characters who are living, breathing creatures need quote unquote experience to do quests and all this shit. And I just thought that half measure didn't quite work, and I really wanted to work in the D&D elements. So, nah.
You know what? All right. I can't really argue.
And sprinkled throughout, I also wanted to really, really subtly hint to this throughout. Like, let's say the ranger lines up a shot on that ogre or whatever that was attacking the carriage. We get a shot, reverse shot, showing her aim is true. It's going to be a perfect shot. Looses the arrow, and then it just somehow misses. Like when you're playing D&D, you have no excuse to miss, and you fucking roll a 2 out of 20, so you miss. So there's a few things like that sprinkled throughout. Just light, subtle D&D-isms that could then, once the meta is revealed and broken, be revealed to have been bad dice rolls.
Okay.
Directed by either J.A. Bayona, he directed the second Jurassic World movie.
Oh, okay.
And he directed a few episodes of Penny Dreadful, so we can do that kind of dark fantasy and high contrast imagery with kind of grisly violence. Or Adam Wingard, who, this isn't going to sound like good pedigree, he directed the Death Note Netflix movie, but he's also done a few decent horror movies, and he's doing the new Godzilla vs. Kong remake.
Okay.
So yeah, he can do that, and he's already got a history with Netflix and anime. Mm-hmm. So
I just got to ask, because you threw me for such a loop, but I'm going to just let that go because you've explained it well enough and makes enough sense and just still thrown for a loop. But anyway, what was your decision to remove the dwarf? Because you left the original party, you just excluded the dwarf.
I just thought 4 was a nice round number for a D&D party, and the characters are honestly just there as proxies to view Goblin Slayer. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
And the dynamic between the elf and the dwarf was just kind of trite. It was just Legolas and Gimli with more hate, and it just seemed entirely superfluous.
That makes enough sense.
I just had to excise one. It was honestly a coin flip. Which one?
Okay.
Except Lizard Man. I couldn't get rid of him. He's cool.
I like to imagine then in the meta that the guy that the elf died, he's actually
he becomes
he's
dwarf.
making the dwarf.
Yeah, that's a fun headcanon. Oh, last thing. The voice of the Goblin Slayer. I say voice because it's just a stuntman in a suit of armor.
Yeah.
But the voice is someone famous. It's either Michael Madsen, who I don't know what the hell you know him from. Like he was Mr. Blonde from Reservoir Dogs, which I know we watched in like middle school. But
I don't remember it.
Yeah. So either way, he has a really cool voice.
Okay.
So just believe me, you can look it up later or something. Or Kiefer Sutherland, who's Jack Bauer on 24.
Oh.
He's got that gruff, cool, reserved, badass guy voice.
All
so
right.
either one of them, probably Michael Madsen. But if I had to pick a more attainable TV actor, it'd be Kiefer.
All right,
So
makes enough sense.
That's it. Okay, since I'm done, you know what that means. Your turn.
All right. What am I doing today, Eric?
Today, you're doing something appropriate for the time we're recording this.
Okay.
Well, just this week, I finished a certain book, and I went to a certain movie, and it got me thinking of something perfect.
Just tell me already.
Stephen King's It. The 2017 version specifically.
All right, I want to state for those listening, I liked the movie. I don't watch horror movies.
He's a complete wuss, and horror is not his thing.
Yeah.
So let's just be very, very supportive of Jared for getting through it.
Like, it was a good movie. I enjoyed...
No, just stop it right there.
Okay.
So
All
the
right.
plot recap.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
For the very few out there who don't know, It, specifically the first one we're covering, It Chapter 1, if you will, is a film about a shape-shifting, if you want to call him, a demon, most famously known as Pennywise the Clown, who terrorizes a group of children who we come to know as the Losers Club in a town called Derry, Maine. They deal with bullies and personal trauma and this horrible, horrible clown who's killing and eating the children while feeding on their fear and terrorizing them horribly. They come together and through friendship and togetherness beat him into submission, and essentially it.
Okay.
Take us there.
We open with a young woman. She is just getting out of club activity. She was playing some sport, probably, let's call it volleyball. She's saying goodbye to her volleyball friends, and she's going to her shoe locker to swap out her shoes, grab her bag, and get going. She's alone by this point. She then hears a little voice. It's inaudible to us, but clearly she understood it better than we do. She turns around and sees a fluttering of something walk past the lockers out of view. She then gets curious and starts following it. She continues following it down the hall as it just keeps staying slightly out of view and slightly away from us. And it leads her deeper into the school until it actually leads her out the school, up a mountain. She walks up the mountain, still following this voice. By this point, you can sort of assume she's a little entranced. Like, it's clearly not just curiosity. There's something more going on here, but nothing's being said. She's following up the mountain all the way into this rickety old schoolhouse building. It's kind of dilapidated. It's kind of falling down. But again, she just is just following this thing, fixated. Walks in, turns the corner. The camera backs out of the building. Door shuts behind her. We hear a scream. We hold on the building. The scream stops. Keep holding. And in the far right corner window, we see what will be known as Pennywise the Clown just peeking out of it.
Oh shit, we're keeping Pennywise.
Yeah, I'll explain.
I guess we couldn't not.
Yeah, I'll explain more about that later. And then we cut.
Okay.
Title card appears 2 years later. We are standing outside the main school at the gate, and we hear roll call going on.
Same school?
Same school. Yeah.
Okay.
We enter through the front door as if we are a student walking in, but we're moving kind of fast. We enter through the front door, go up to the first classroom. It says 1-1. Then we go to the next one, 1-2. All the while, we're still hearing this roll call. 1-3, 1-4, yada, 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 until we get to 1-9. Then
shit. Sorry, that was Stephen King reference. He got me.
Then we enter the room just as the teacher's finishing up roll call. And then we begin a normal class. And then we go forward, and now we're at lunch. We are now surveying the whole classroom. Like, all the students haven't left yet. They're all like grouping up in the little friend groups and they're chatting. We're kind of going through each group of children, hearing what they're talking about, getting to know them a little. We're basically learning each of these students.
Then I have to ask, is there a approximation of each of the quote unquote losers from the movie, or are these entirely new characters? Do they retain some or any of the...
So by this point, what will be the approximation for the Losers Club hasn't really been singled out yet. Gotcha. They are here, but there's a lot less of them.
Okay, and we're just among the class, just seeing the students.
Yeah, we're meeting all of the students.
Okay.
We then hear the bell for the lunch. They all sit down, and then we resume classes. More day goes by, and then bell rings again. We are now leaving the classroom, except 3 boys are still standing around talking, excited about something. We go over to them, and they're talking about going to the club, and they're really excited to do that. And we follow with them as they go to the Occult Research Club.
My dudes.
Yeah. And Eric, you may not be familiar with this, but this is a big anime trope. The Occult Research Club is in a lot of anime. A lot of times students just use it as an excuse to not do anything because, you know, there's not too much you can do when it's dealing with ghosts and stuff, but some kids take it seriously, like these kids.
And me, damn it. Go these kids.
So we follow them into the club room, and they're talking about their planned expedition to the old schoolhouse building up the mountain and how they're getting excited. One kid brought an old video recorder. One kid has like a net for whatever reason. They don't really know what they're doing, but they're just excited to go explore.
How old are these kids? Like middle school, elementary school?
We are in middle school.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to say the net, then they're just fucking around.
Yeah.
You've already won me over. I would hang out with these kids. Would have hung out with these kids when I was in middle school.
Fair enough. So they're talking about this expedition they're going to go on tomorrow. And they leave the preparations in the room. We follow them out of the school building, and then we move away, back up the mountain, up to the school building, and end the first episode.
Spooky.
I'm going to say this now. This is the first time I've mentioned anything about the ending. The opening and ending are very different in styles. The opening is quiet and doesn't really give away that this is a horror. It's kind of normal, but the ending gets worse and worse as the series goes on. It has a lot of changing imagery, a lot of weird symbols that appear, a lot of different imagery that changes from episode to episodes, Latin that appears, which is weird, especially since it's a Japanese anime. So every episode has a different styled ending, and this one's the most tame.
Do we still get like the Calliope aesthetic of like circus shit and balloons at all?
No, that's a lot less of that.
Okay. Just had to be curious.
Yeah, if we do see clown stuff,
it's revolved directly around Pennywise.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, had to ask.
We begin the second episode as they're already exploring this old schoolhouse building. They're all together, they're laughing, they're talking, they have flashlights, and they're just making a day of it. One of them, the leader, who is our stand-in for Bill,
my man, Big Bill,
is sort of trying to spook the others and say that there's apparently a malevolent spirit that lives in this building, and he haunts the school for hundreds of years, and he's killed many kids before and whatever, which gets a twinge on one of the other kids' faces when he says that he's killed someone. Then our leader, Bill, apologizes about.
Good.
And then it goes silent for a little bit as they change the topic and continue exploring. But then there's a noise from behind one of them. He turns around and looks and doesn't see anything. When he turns back around, the other two are gone. He is now alone.
Ruh-roh.
We now cut back to the other two who haven't noticed that the third one's missing yet. They're exploring. They're still talking amongst each other. And then one of them turns around and says, hey, where's
Blank.
where's the third one? And
So they've been supernaturally separated?
yes.
Spooky.
Then the second one sees, the sister, the girl from the beginning, who will be revealed is his sister, older sister specifically, run into one of the rooms. He's so mesmerized and so confused. He's like, wait, what was that? And the other guy, Bill, is like, what did you see? I didn't see anything. And he goes running after her. Bill like, wait, what are you going? Where are you going? And then as he enters the room, door shuts. Bill runs up to the door, tries opening it, shaking it, and trying as hard as he can. Door won't open.
Yep.
We now cut back to the one that got separated at the beginning, because everyone's separated by this point. He's the most timid of all of them, which needs to be stated. So he's more scared than everyone. He's like, guys,
He'll be our Eddie cast back for the day.
the building starts shifting. Not in any dramatic way, but it just starts getting creepier, like darker, more red, more shadows and stuff like that as he gets deeper and deeper. And the camera doesn't follow him. The camera stays stationary as he walks further and further away from the camera.
I'm nodding approvingly as the huge horror fan, and Jared as the person who probably doesn't know what horror is.
I did work really hard to at least put some effort into making this kind of scary.
Keep going. I'm intrigued.
Anyway, we cut back to the guy that went after his will be revealed sister. He's in the room. He's surrounded by weird noises, and the room itself is not, let's say just basically, it's not stationary. It's warbling. He is banging on the door like, let me out, let me out. And then we see over his shoulder the makeup of Pennywise. It's not fully in view, but it's just over his shoulder, just in the shadows.
We just see a slight white face behind him, creeping.
The door then flies open and he runs face first into Bill. They fall on each other and they're like, we have to get out of here. We have to get out of here. They start running down the hall and then they see their friend wandering the hall. They run up to him and they're like, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. This whole time when they've been looking at this friend, his eyes were like in shadow. He looks up. His eyes are actually giant holes with teeth in them. He looks right at them. Mouth opens to start saying something and they scream and they just book it.
Very Japanese horror. I see what you're going for.
Yeah.
Nice. Japanese horror is either body horror or ghost girls.
Like sexy ghost girls or just...
No. Like the Samara from The Ring.
Gotcha.
That kind of thing.
They're running down the hall again, and this time they actually meet their friend. They actually say to him, we really need to get out of here, and they all book out. So all three of them do get out of the building, and they shut the door, and they just book it down the mountain. By this point, they've left a lot of their stuff. Like, I think they've dropped all but one of the flashlights, and I think maybe they have the camcorder.
R.I.P. the net.
We once again hold on the building as they're running down the mountain, and this time we see the door slowly slide open as a hand grabs onto the side of the door.
Spooky.
We cut to the next day, and the teacher's again doing roll call. We're not hearing most of it. We're hearing mostly the
guys we know.
Yeah, the guys we know talking about what happened last night. Like, what's going on? I don't know. The teacher then says a name twice. The second time was slightly louder. And they're still talking. This is a third time. And a fourth. And at the fifth time, he's like, all right, Ibaki isn't here. They look over to the empty seat a little worried, but honestly, they're just like, oh, she's probably sick or something. You know, it happens. Day goes about normal. They go to their club room. They're mostly still freaked out about what happened, but nothing really happens. We then go through several days of the same thing. Ibaki has not come to class for a week.
Truant.
The teacher is not saying anything, but when he gets to Ibaki's name, ends up skipping it.
Yee.
We then hear the boys talking about how it may have been the spirit's fault, the one they met. And the timid one's like, no, that's just crazy. Like, there's no way. I don't know what's going on in there, but I'm sure it has nothing to do with her being sick for a week.
She probably just ran away, or she's sick,
Yeah, like some realistic excuse.
Excuses.
Next day, another student's missing.
I was waiting for it.
Yep. And by now, the boys are actually worried. We also have the police enter the school classroom, and they're interviewing the kids about, like, when the last time they saw Ibaki and this new student that went missing and stuff like that. And the boys are terrified. They are too scared to mention
that they fucking might have seen ghosties or whatever.
Because they also know they won't be believed, so they don't bother mentioning it. But in their heads, that's what they're thinking the entire time they're interviewed. They're like, it was probably that malevolent spirit, but no, I haven't seen Ibuki. The police then institute a town-wide curfew and buddy system. So in Japan, as far as I can tell, school buses are not a thing. They get buses when they go on trips, but in every day-to-day, students either take public transportations or they walk.
Or possibly bike.
Yeah. So they institute a system where all students have to walk in groups. And they do this by the location of houses.
Perfectly reasonable.
3 boys live next to each other. They happen to work out that really well. A girl is added to the group who is then revealed to be the childhood friend of Bill.
Does she still have red hair as our Beverly equivalent?
No,
that
she's
would not
blonde.
make any sense.
She's blonde.
Okay, so still idiosyncratic hair.
Yes.
Word.
There's a little bit of like a bonding moment, like, oh, we haven't talked in so long. We're in the same class. Why don't you talk to me? And Bill's like, well, I didn't think you'd want to talk to me. You're so popular now. And there's a little bit of a cute
social drama.
Yeah, and the other 2 boys are being third wheels as they walk home. Now we see inside their houses, the 3 boys, where we see them each separately going to bed. They're saying goodnight to their parents and yada, yada, yada. One at a time. We're obviously seeing these one at a time. Because it happens to all of them. They each hear a noise that draws them into another room. We don't see what happens in the other room, but each of them get a really, really bad fright. Like they're screaming at the top of the lungs, makes their parents come out of the room and like, what's wrong? And they're crying and they don't know what's going on. Cut to the next day. The boys decide to have an emergency meeting of the occult club.
The Midnight Society.
A little. They are sitting around and they're talking to each other about what happened last night, and they're realizing it happened to all of them. And then the lights go out. I also did forget to mention that after the little bonding moment with the girl, they actually kind of invited her into the club room. So she is there with them.
Cool.
So the lights go out. They start kind of freaking out because by this point, most of the teachers are gone and most people are gone from the school by this point. They all decide to grab various implements from the room. One grabs like a baseball bat, one grabs a mop and that kind of stuff. And they decide to split up and figure out what's going on. As they're walking around, one of the 2 that wasn't Bill.
I can't abide by this whole not naming the people thing. Since we got 2 out of 4, I have to. So it's Beverly, Bill, Richie, and Eddie.
Sure. But
Eddie's the timid one.
Okay, specifically the ones that are most likely in terms of like caricature versions of them, we got Bill, we got the fat one, and we got the raunchy one.
Oh, so we're changing that. Never mind. What I said was wrong.
Well, but we're changing some things. But
Yeah,
those
no,
are
I'm
those
just
are the
kidding.
3 that are most likely here.
Okay, so we have Ben, Bill, Beverly, and Richie.
Sure. They're running after the scream and they step into room 1-4 and they see that particular person's crush from the class just sort of gorging on something. Like they're sitting at a table with their back turned to the door and they're eating. He timidly goes, what are you still doing here? What are you eating? The girl then, without turning around, says, meat. And he's like, what? And then her head turns 180 around, eyes wide. Human meat. Her jaw unhinges. She reveals a body that she'd been holding and that she was eating. She lifts the body directly over her head. Body slides right down into her mouth. He runs right out of the room.
I mean, same.
We then cut back to the other 2 who are running away from something. We didn't get to see what, but they're also running. And they all end up running right back to the club room. And they decide they have to discuss options because they've, by this point, tried opening windows. They've tried opening doors. Things are locked. Things that shouldn't
lock.
Yeah, shouldn't lock are locked. And there's also no teachers around for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. They're just quantum locked in this freak school.
Exactly. They decide to set out together to go explore more of the building, figure out what's going on. As they're walking down the hall, they come across another person. At first, they're wary. They're all ready to beat up whatever this person thing is because none of them are believing it's what it is. When it's revealed, it's actually their class rep, another female that had been introduced when I introduced everyone in the class.
What the hell's a class rep?
It's basically like a low-level student council member kind of thing. It's someone that just represents the class if they need to talk to the school, or also the one that stands at the front, tells everyone to sit down when the teacher enters. It's basically the person in charge of making the class orderly.
Okay, so somewhere between a prefect and a class president?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, had to ask.
She's also scared, trapped here. She has no idea what's going on. They basically absorb her into the group. They're like, just stay with us. We don't fully know what's going on either, but if you stick with us, we'll be fine. They hear another scream as they run into yet another classroom. All of them see what is clearly a pile of dead students being eaten by crows.
Ooh.
Like the eyes being ripped out, the sinew from arms being pulled off, and stuff like that, they all go running and screaming, except the class rep runs in a different direction.
That's another Stephen King reference, kind of. The Stand is all about crows. Well, I mean, there's a lot of crow imagery.
Okay, well, I'll take that one. Once again, they run back to the club room, and they're freaking out. They're like, "This is useless. What's the point?" The class rep even went missing, and they're like discussing their options, and they're scared, and there's a little more tension building, and there's also a little bit more of a coupling between Bill and the female, and then we see the door shake and open. We cut. We now are watching the class rep wander the halls alone. She's scared. She's alone. She doesn't know what's going on. When we see Pennywise, full Pennywise, walk up to her and basically go, "What's wrong, dearie? Are you scared?" She just looks at him wide-eyed, completely out of her mind, scared. And then the doors to the classroom that she was standing next to her fly open, and all of the club come out with weapons, and they just take a swing at Pennywise, which he semi-dodges. It wings him, but it doesn't fully get him.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah, but now they have Pennywise surrounded, and they're swinging after him with all their various stupid implements, and it is kind of working. Not as well as they would want, but it is working.
It's not doing nothing.
Yes, as he is slowly trying to scare them into different states of fear, and they're actually beating it. We go on for this for a little bit as a little bit of a chase scene / fight occurs for a little while until Pennywise is backed into a classroom corner and they impale him with the now broken mop as he looks down, reaches for it, and does one last to try to scare them. No effect. He starts disintegrating in a similar manner as he does in the movie when he fell down the second well inside the well.
Cistern.
Yeah,
flakes apart like Voldemort.
Yes.
Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole.
We now cut ahead as the police are once again interviewing the now surviving 19 members of Class 19.
Yeah, 1919.
And the students are our group is being tight-lipped about what happened. They're not mentioning Pennywise because honestly, no one would believe it anyway. So they are going back to their club room, talking about what has happened. And by now, both the class rep and the other girl are joining them. They're more or less fully initiated members of the Creepy Club.
Yay.
They decide that if anything like this should ever happen again, they will come back together and they'll deal with it because no one else can and no one else will. We then cut. Now, here's an important thing, because we're at the end. That was the end.
Yeah.
Remember how I mentioned the ending has like different symbols and different changing? If you string all the Latin together from the different episodes it appears in order, it will translate to "It is not dead."
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that little ARG. That's a little gravity fallsy. I love it.
All right. So that's how it ends.
Okay. I don't have any specific questions. I mean, again, I will give you your props for, again, your first attempt ever at anything, even remotely real horror. I think you did a good job, especially with how nervous you were about it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
very.
I'm a stupendously, insanely huge fan of this story, movie and book and all of it. And there's elements I would have liked to see that were excised. But again, I think you mostly retained the important stuff, or at least a lot of it. You retained the togetherness of the kids, and you retained the adults can't help you, we have to do this ourselves aspect of it, which are both really important.
Yeah, those are both very important things. I felt that I wanted to excise a lot of the kids because 7 was far too many kids. I personally felt that a mix of 3 boys, 2 girls would work better. Not bad. I wanted that to be gained slowly.
No, that's cool. I honestly just think you could have gone a little further with it. I guess there's naturally left open for more here. I think you could have gone more into the back and forth between it and the kids. More of the rivalry, if you will. But I mean, again, if there's more, there's more. And I mean, it's not bad as is. And I'll also, again, give you props as someone who's just a huge, huge horror fan. You included a lot of Japanese horrorisms in one way or another. Again, the Japanese love that whole body turning into a mouth thing too. So
yeah,
a lot of whole body turning into blank, like eyes and mouths, and again, body horror.
I mean, I guess it's also because something in that way also scares me. So it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Either way, you did a pretty damn decent job.
I'm glad.
All right. Are we good? Anything else for the day?
No, I think we achieved our objective.
Woohoo.
All right. So if you want to follow us on Twitter, we're Jared N. Eric 1. That's Jared N, the letter N, Eric 1.
And that'll get you to the SoundCloud and the blah, 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 everything else. So I'm Eric.
I'm Jared.
And thank you for listening to our little live